I do have a story I like to tell about the only time that I've ever seen the stars. And I wonder how many of you have had an experience, maybe on a summer night or on a cold winter's night, where you were outside and you walked outside and you had a moment where you were quiet and you looked up at the stars. How many of you had a moment where you just had a feeling of awe at that? Well, let me tell you something. Unless you're older than me and have a very good memory, you've probably never seen the stars, not like I'm talking about. The only way you can see stars really anymore is to travel far away from civilization, because what civilization has done is to put light pollution in the sky so that our children cannot see the stars and probably will never see them the way Jesus saw them. You have to go far away, maybe somewhere in Africa, maybe out in Labrador, far from civilization, to see the sky as Moses saw it. I had one opportunity to do that. After the end of the Sandinista-Contra War, I went to northeast Nicaragua with my camera to document the return of the refugees as they came back from Honduras, out in the jungle. And let me tell you, this is far away from any civilization that you know about. To get there, you start in Miami, you get on a plane, you fly 3.5 hours down to Managua, the capital city. And in Managua, then you get on a troop transport plane, one of those old prop jets. Those of you that were in the military will know what I'm talking about. You go in there, you sit on steel shelves by the wall, and you're strapped to the wall. And you got on that plane, and it lumbered through the air for 2 hours to take you to the East Coast, where you landed in a muddy field. And at the edge of the muddy field, there's a little ramshackle wooden hut, and that's the airport. But you're not done yet, because the place I was going was a little town called Billa Karma, up by the border with Honduras. And there I had to rent a pickup truck, a four-wheel drive pickup truck, and hire a driver. And get in the pickup truck and get on a dirt road that is worse than any dirt road you've ever seen, and drive 8 hours north. This was right after the war, so this road had bomb craters in it. We had to go off-road to get around the bomb craters. The bridges over the rivers were built out of wood, and some of them were missing really significant parts. And let me tell you, it's very frightening to go over some of those bridges in a pickup truck. 8 hours later, with my teeth jarring in the back of my head, we reached the little village of Billa Karma. There's about 600 people live there. Most of them are Moravians, Miskito Indians. There are some of them who are Methodists. How many Methodists here tonight? Yeah. Well, we like Methodists too. And there were a couple other smaller churches there, but the Moravian church was the big church in town. And I stayed with the pastor, a wonderful man named Silvio Diaz. When I say I stayed with him, the houses in Billa Karma are all hand-built. They would be okay for cabins in a rough Boy Scout camp back in the 60s, but I think none of our children would put up with these houses even as camp houses today. And Silvio had the largest house in town because he was important. He was the pastor. He was the leader of the community. So his house was about 18 feet by 24 feet, and 6 people lived in there normally. And on the front it had a little wooden porch. Now these houses are made out of hand-sawn lumber. I got to watch the young guys, the young strapping guys with muscles, sawing the lumber by hand, and I met the guy who built Silvio's house as we sat together on the porch. But the one thing I do every night, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles from any nighttime light, was after the sun went down, I'd read a little bit with my flashlight, and then I'd put out the flashlight and I'd go outside. And I'd just stand there and look up. And it's hard to describe the emotion that you feel, because the sky that you see most of us only ever get to see replicated in a planetarium or some artificial environment like that. The Milky Way, something that most of us have never seen, stretches from one side of the sky to the other. Thousands of diamonds strewn upon a velvet background that glows purple. It's an amazing, amazing sight. This was the sky that Jesus looked up at night. This was the sky that your ancestors looked up and saw, a sky where you can actually see the constellations. And if every night you looked carefully, you could tell that Venus moved a little bit in relation to the other stars. Every night I went out there to have my moment alone with the universe. It was something I'll never forget, and it's something I hope you'll experience at some point. The last night I was there, I didn't get a chance to do that, because the last night I was there, they knew I'd be leaving in the morning, and so they wanted to have a time together. And so Silvio called some of the men from the village to come over and join us on the little porch in his house. One of them brought a guitar, and one of them brought a little drum, and one of them brought along the jawbone of an ass, just like Samson killed the Philistines with, and he turned it into a rhythm instrument with a stick going on the teeth. And we sat there and had some music together. And as the sun went down, Silvio said, "This is a special night. Go turn on the generator." Now I want you to understand, they had a generator. But the diesel for the generator not only cost way more than diesel here when they bought it in Puerto Cabezas, 8 hours away, but it had to be put in 5-gallon cans and trucked all that 8 hours up. So the diesel was very, very valuable. They only turned on the generator for necessities or special events, and I guess I was a special event that night. So they turned on the generator, and there on the porch he had a 40-watt light bulb. And it's amazing how much light a 40-watt light bulb puts out when there's no other lights anywhere around. And there, under that 40-watt light bulb, we began to sing hymns together. Now, I don't speak any Spanish. I don't speak Miskito. One of the guys spoke only Miskito. One of the guys spoke a little Miskito and some Spanish. We had not much communication in terms of understanding what one another had said, but we knew the same hymns. And so we started to sing together in 3 different languages. And we knew the same hymns. We sang Amazing Grace together. We sang Blessed Assurance together. I didn't know all the verses from memory of all of them, but they did. And we sang together, When I Survey the Wondrous Cross. And then because we were Moravians, we sang some Moravian hymns. We sang Morning Star together. And let me tell you what, Morning Star sounds really interesting in Miskito. And we had a moment together, a time together, without verbal communication that was absolutely amazing. And then after we finished Morning Star, Silvio broke out into this wonderful grin, and he said, "Now I have a real treat for you." And he got up and he went in the hut. I had no idea what he was going to bring out. And he came back out with a cassette player, like we used to have in the 70s, a little plastic thing with wood grain and a little chrome on it. A lot of you remember these. Battery powered, except he didn't have any batteries for it anymore. They'd long since died. But he had a cord and he could plug it in and run it when the generator was on. And so he plugged it in. And he looked up at me and he said, "Now you're in for a real treat." And he pressed the play button. And out of that little tinny 3-inch speaker came the voice of Jimmy Swaggart singing Rock of Ages. Rock of Ages, cleft for me, let me hide myself in thee. And Silvio and the other men were spiritually transported as they listened. They had awe on their faces. They were worshiping together. as they listened to the crooning voice of Jerry Lee Lewis's cousin as he played the piano and had that little lilting voice, that cry, that country cry in his voice. And after he finished the last verse, Silvio pushed the stop button, and with this beatific smile on his face, he said, "Can't he sing?" Well, I want you to understand, this was just a couple years after Brother Swaggart's kind of disgrace, and this was a couple years after his tearful apology on television and just embarrassing as all get out. And I didn't know what to say. And finally I just said, well, Jimmy Swaggart, well, he's had some trouble lately. And Silvio's face clouded over and he said, "Yeah, I know, I heard. But can't he sing?" And I hope that you'll have an experience like that. You're not going to stumble into it. I hope you have an experience where you go somewhere where you have to carry your own water and where you can go out at night and look up at stars like Jesus saw and have an evening with people that don't speak the same language but who worship the same God. Thank you very much.